Hey, I'm going to do a quick overview of the Colorado Early Learning and Development Guidelines. This document is really essential in our field. It guides early childhood programs and staff and even parents to an understanding of child development that is based in developmentally appropriate practice and expectations for age. In any other early childhood classes that you take with us at Front Range, you will likely see this document a number of times and you'll use it in a variety of ways. So in this class, we're going to do just a really brief overview to get you familiar with how it works. So you'll see here there's a table of contents, which is really helpful as you're trying to get to a specific age and or specific area of development. So if you work with infants and toddlers, you're going to focus on that birth to 3 section. If you work with preschoolers, you're going to focus on ages 3 to 5. And then if you're working in the early elementary sector, kindergarten through 3rd grade, this is the area that you would mostly rely on. These are aligned with the Colorado academic standards, and they are based on the Head Start early learning framework, which was really the first national document that looked at how children, all the areas for holistic child development. And Colorado adapted this to line it up with the Colorado academic standards to get a little more specific to what we were expecting in our state. So as we move down, I want to take a moment to look with you at this guideline chart. This really gives us an orientation to the overall document. It's pretty broad, but it's worth taking a minute to look into. And if you're following along on this or you want to go back and look, you can find it on page 4. See, it's right here, page 4. So you can see here with this gray chart, let me make this a little bit bigger for a moment. There we go. This gray chart here shows you that the inner ring focuses on birth to 3, and then 3 to 5 in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So the concentric circles really are from birth further out through development. Now as we look at this circle here, you'll see here in infants and toddlers there's less categories overall, and those categories expand as children get older. So you'll see here that for infants and toddlers, this document will focus on cognitive development, language and literacy, emotional development separated from social development, physical development and health, and approaches to learning. Approaches to learning is the most common one for people to go, hey, what is that? Basically, approaches to learning means how do you approach learning? How do you approach the environment? What ways do you learn? Do you, approaches to learning will be things like persistence, patience, cause and effect, hands-on exploration, so on and so forth. So it's less about a content area and more about how you approach the world. And then as we move from infants and toddlers out to this preschool ring, you see cognitive development breaks out to these bigger areas. Now, this doesn't mean that that infants and toddlers don't have creative arts expression or social studies, science. They do, but they all kind of wrap into a more general category of cognitive development. We want to make sure that we bring all of these to infants and toddlers. We just don't break out the way we look at it in the same way that we do with preschoolers. And so you see that these areas continue that we discussed before, continue into 3 to 5-year-olds, and then language development breaks out a little bit. Literacy, knowledge, and skills, language development, and then English language development for children who are learning 2 languages. And in early childhood, we tend to call those dual language learners, meaning children are still learning their first language and another language at the same time, one of which would be English in our case. You'll also see these color bands here. And you see this here under approaches to learning, and you see this here in logic and reasoning. What these colors represent is each one of these areas, saying that in logic and reasoning and in approaches to learning, this happens within all the other areas. So approaches to learning applies to creative arts. And you can see that with this orange here, meaning how you approach understanding creative arts has an impact on how you learn. Same with logic and reasoning. The ability to engage in logic and reasoning tasks will have an effect on your ability to understand creative arts expression, or your social emotional development, or your language development, so on and so forth. So as we look at this, this chart and we go to the next age group, here we're looking at kindergarten through 3rd grade. And you can see that some of the areas break out more. So creative arts expression breaks into more specific areas, but other areas start to overlap, such as mathematics, where logic and reasoning is more closely tied to mathematics and reading and writing development. Then this outer ring out here is all about really attuning to the whole child and building their skills around critical thinking, self-direction, informational literacy meaning how children decode information in their world, the multitude of ways that they get it and understand it. So you might understand some information through an auditory means, other information through visual means, and some through tactile means. And how does your brain interpret all of that to assimilate that information into your understanding? So that's the basic overview. Now we're going to look at a little bit more about how this document is broken out. The birth to age 3 section, so the infants and toddlers section starts here, and this is page 5, I believe. Yep. This is going to give an overview of the birth to age 3, some of the resources that were used to create this document, as well as other resources you can trust in as you do further research in your classes. And then it shows that this is the little part of this chart that we're focused on here. And then you'll get a longer narrative description of each one of the areas of development. And so that's just a longer description of what is encompassed in that area and understanding what that means. As we move past this, we will then come to a section that starts to break out age groups and areas of development. So the first one we see is ages 4 to 8 months, physical health and development. Now we know children are developing before 4 months old, right? However, young children's, the way we look at young children's development is less specific in these areas before ages 4 months. Once we get to 4 months, a child is much more interactive in their environment, and we can start to see some of these examples of how the child is growing in this area. So for this first one, physical development and health, the indicator is listed here. The examples are listed here, and then the things adults can do to support that development is listed here. So the first area of physical health and development that is focused on in this document is perceptual development. And that's the ability to become aware of the social and physical environment through your senses. So one of the indicators is that a child uses senses to explore objects and people in the environment. These are examples of how a child will do it. These are things that an adult can do to help support a child developing perceptual development. So as you go through this document, you'll see there's a number of physical health and development indicators, and then what children show as they show that indicator. And again, examples that they may demonstrate and how we can support that. And you can see that this continues to go through physical health and development. As we keep going through this, then we're finished with that section, we move into social development. And the same thing with social development. It's organized by age group so that as you're working with a particular age, you can focus on just one section of the document. So if you're working in an infant program, you might want to print out or bookmark these pages ages 4 to 6 months. But if you're working with preschoolers, you're going to want to jump to that section and look at that instead. And let's see if I can get there. So we're still in 4 to 8 months. And by the way, you can see here, ages 9 to 18 months is the next section, logically, following again the course of development by age. And then you keep going, and we will eventually, I promise, get to the next age group. This is still 9 to 18 months. And then you can see now we're in the 19 to 36 months, so on and so forth. So you can really grab those sections and get to know what to expect from all areas of development for that age group. So now that we've done this overview, you can use this document to start working on some of the learning activities for this week in our course.